The Buck Sexton Podcast.
Freedom is our fight this year. You have a Democrat Party that increasingly just bears its authoritarian fangs without any sense whatsoever of fair play and good faith toward the other side, because they haven't had it for years, because defeating Trump in their minds justified absolutely anything.
The Buck Sexton Podcast. Get it for free daily on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts.
Hi, this is Newt. Due to the virus, I'm recording from home, so you may notice a difference in audio quality. On this episode of Newt's World, I'm especially happy to have David Grasso with us talking about the lessons entrepreneurs can teach us. He's part of the Gingrich 360 network of really innovative, bright podcast hosts who are exploring a variety of different topics. And in David's case, he's really exploring the whole issue of entrepreneurship and the economy and how to think about the next few years economically. David was a television reporter in Florida and Texas, and then he joined Bold TV in 2015. Today, David leads the network and hosts Bold Politics. He's the host of the new Gingrich 360 podcast, Follow the Prophet, and he has a master's of public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School. I'm pleased to welcome my guest, David Grasso. David, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Newt.
As I understand it, part of your background in understanding the importance of free enterprise and entrepreneurship is your own mother's family's experience in Cuba and then later. So could you chat about how your family's background affected the way you approach all this?
Well, my family has very shallow roots in the Americas. In fact, my dad's family is from Italy as well. And they all left because they really didn't have economic opportunity. And my mom's family was so poor when they came from Spain to Cuba that they didn't own real shoes. They were wearing something called alpargatas, which is something that hipsters wear now and they think it's cool. They're basically canvas shoes. I mean, my ancestors were so poor. They lived under repressive governments, and they came to the Americas to really find economic freedom. And that's really the identity of my family. Unfortunately for my mom's family, things didn't work out in Cuba, and they had to re-immigrate again after the Cuban Revolution and Castro's regime in the late 1950s that came in. By the mid-60s, they were here in the New York area. And this really come to define the way my family views the world and in my upbringing and the way we view American life, really. We love America, but we're especially happy for the economic opportunity it provides. And really, I've built my career in trying to spread the message that being born here is a massive privilege that young people really need to leverage.
When you talk about that massive privilege, you look at a place like Venezuela or Cuba or Zimbabwe, why do you think it's so hard to explain that those big government centralized dictatorships don't work and that free market with entrepreneurial opportunity is a totally different experience that just has the virtue that it works? When you talk to people, why do you find it so hard to get them to understand that?
Because in some ways, Newt, it's become harder for young people. In other ways, it's become easier. And when they're talking to their parents about things, these young people say, why am I having trouble getting a job? Why can I not afford a house? Why is the cost of healthcare out of control? But the flip side of that is that we live in a world that is incredibly flat for entrepreneurs. Newt, you remember when no one would take you seriously unless you had an office or a business card and a staff? Well, now with the internet and the digital economy, there is all this opportunity. So what happens is that both of these truths exist. While it is more difficult in some ways for young people to prosper, it's become that much easier. And that's sometimes difficult to swallow for people, especially when they have degrees and education and training that is no longer valid. And I'm not talking about old people. I'm talking about young people, because institutions of higher learning have not prepared young people for today's rapidly changing economy. And that really is what my career is all about, is explaining to the young people of America that there is opportunity there. In fact, in some ways, there's more opportunity than ever.
I'm curious, what got you focused on the economy as a central part of life? Because it sounds to me like you really picked this up much, much younger than most people ever do. How did that happen?
I think it has a lot to do with where I grew up. I grew up in Florida. I originally grew up in Little Havana. We moved to the Disney town of Celebration in Orlando, which you and Callista have been here, Newt. I remember when you campaigned here. And I really saw building an economy from the ground up. If you know anything about Central Florida history, there was nothing here before Disney World arrived in the early 70s. And it's really revolutionized everything here. This was a one-horse town, and now there's, 5 million people in this region. And I really saw a community being built. Growing up in Celebration, I saw everything from the ground up. How to create institutions, how to create neighborhoods, how to create lasting traditions. And a lot of that was powered by economic growth. And marry that with my family's experience, and I really saw how important it is to have a free enterprise market and really to have that opportunity, because it was really the catalyst for everything. Without that, nothing works. And I think politicians, people, and mainstream culture tends to forget that.
What does COVID-19 have to do with losing your home? A lot. The FBI reported that since the virus struck, cybercrime is up 75%. It gets worse. The legal title to all our homes are online now. The crime is called home title theft, and it's everywhere. Cyber criminals find the title to your home online, forge your signature on a quitclaim deed, and refile as the new owner of your home. You're off title. They destroy you by taking out loans against your home, steal the cash, and stick you with the payments. You may not know until you get late payment or a foreclosure notice. Home Title Lock protects your home's legal title. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. The instant they detect tampering, they shut it down. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. Then use code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at HometitleLock.com.
As the demand for telemedicine grows, so does the need for connectivity. 5G meets that need. Qualcomm remains focused on giving doctors and patients superior, security-rich 5G connectivity. Learn more at qualcomm.com/InventionAge.
You've added to your activities this brand new podcast on Gingrich 360, which we're really excited about, called Follow the Prophet. Tell us what the show's about.
So I want to say this is the first time I've actually named something in my life. I'm terrible at naming things, and it's really inspired by, my Christian roots, we want to call it. I thought of Follow the Prophet, etc. And I really wanted a show that was about, hey, economic thinking is a lifestyle. And what are the things that I take for granted in my family, right? And the way we talk about money at the dinner table, and we talk about investments, and we talk about money management and long-term goals. What is the culture around money, and how do we get other young people to really understand the culture around money? Specifically, two ways. One is, how do you make money? And a lot of that has to do with working for yourself. And two, once you have money, what do you do with it? And what are the specific behaviors that really promote longevity and sustainability?
Given that approach, what kind of guests are you going to have?
We have the co-founder of Square. We have entrepreneurs. We have former beauty queens turned entrepreneurs. We have the head chef from Blaze Pizza, which is one of the most fastest growing pizza brands in the United States right now. Basically, we have a lineup of successful people who tell us their secrets on how they got to where they got today. And a big part of that is failure. So if you're interested in hearing about how these people failed fast and hard and rose up to where they are today, Follow the Prophet is definitely your show.
I identify in part because I failed in my first effort at writing a novel, and I've now published, I think, 7. I failed twice running for Congress and finally won only the third time. I failed about 8 times trying to create a majority in the House and only finally succeeded on the 8th try. So I have real identity with the fact that sometimes, as an entrepreneur, You go out and you try something, you learn from it, and you keep moving. And so I think that's intriguing. Will you focus on practical guests who are actually doing it? What should people expect when they turn on Follow the Prophet?
So these are people who are actually business people. They might be in different phases of their career. They might be just getting started and in the growth phase, or really already senior, or even one of our guests is going to be coming up, the guy who made Dunkin' Donuts what it is today. And he's, of course, retired. So we have people in all different phases of life. And what we're trying to do is get that intergenerational transfer of knowledge. While it is a show primarily aimed at people who are younger, we have guests of all ages. What we want to drive home is that the culture around money is important and failure is okay. Failure is, in fact, the only way that we learn how to succeed. And remember, Newt, you were talking about all of your failures. You're not remembered that way, and neither are all of my guests. And a lot of entrepreneurs have shame around their past failures. And instead, it's like a therapy session. They come on, we talk about their failure. We talk about how, their parents almost cut them off and they couldn't make it work and their friends had doubts and now they're a big deal. So I think it's a very important message to send to people that, trying your best is all that you can do. And sometimes failure is baked into the cake.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's one of the things we have to constantly, in each generation, teach the next cycle of young people. But I'm curious, given all the different ways that you can communicate, the work you're doing on Bold TV, et cetera, what is there about podcasting that attracted you? And why did you decide to create and host Follow the Prophet?
I've never done audio before. This is my first time really doing an audio specific product. Of course, all my videos are turned into podcasts, but this is the first time something's been commissioned specifically with me on audio.
What is there about the concept or the experience of a podcast that you think makes this a unique opportunity to communicate entrepreneurship, small business, human experiences in a way that has access to a lot of people?
So the great thing about podcasts is that it gives you more time. And when you have audio only, you get to really listen to what's going on. As primarily a video journalist, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we look and how we're presenting. And you know a lot about this, Newt, because you've spent half your life on camera, right? When you're doing audio, you get to really focus on the sound, what's happening in people's brains. And additionally, for me as a video journalist, to be able to sit down and talk to someone for 20 minutes is a gift, it's a privilege, and it's highly unusual for us. We live in a world where people don't have large attention spans anymore. The one exception to this is podcasts, and people use it as a way to relax during their commute and during times where there's not a lot of intensity, and they really get to listen and absorb the message a lot better than they would through other mediums such as video.
I noticed, though, that in your planning, you really want to aim Follow the Prophet as a podcast right at a younger audience. Why is that?
Because I feel it's the most important. If you look at net wealth, baby boomers are worth 10 times what millennials are worth. And that's really what's fundamentally changing our politics. And of course, a lot of that has to do with age. Net worth tends to rise up to a certain age and then tends to fall as people retire, right? We need a new economically empowered generation if we're going to avoid government dependency, if we're going to avoid falling into the trap of what a lot of European countries and a lot of countries here in the Western Hemisphere have done. If we want to renew our commitment to capitalism and to free markets, we have to have a new generation of entrepreneurs and problem solvers who understand all of the opportunity that exists in today's world.
Somebody gets intrigued with your podcast, they decide to listen regularly. What do you hope over time they will take from that?
Number one, the culture around money is a worldview. No matter what your politics are, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of framing, and really a lens by which we view the world. Two, the failure lesson is really important to me. Failure is a part of entrepreneurship and really the human experience, and it's okay. And three, there's always something to learn from people, especially people who learned baptism by fire, who have been through a lot. it's so important. Even if you're working for someone else, a lot of those entrepreneurial skills can really help you succeed. Even if you're in a corporate environment, there's such things called intrapreneurs now, which means you have that entrepreneurial mindset, even though you're working for a big or medium or small organization and not for yourself. So I believe this is a toolkit to succeed in life. And these episodes will help people better understand how they can succeed even in their own world.
Will you be giving people a chance to email you or communicate with you to sort of ask the questions that they're encountering or the problems that they're encountering?
I'd be delighted to do that. That sounds like an excellent idea, Newt.
I'm intrigued because, a lot of podcasts are vaguely educational. A lot of podcasts are entertaining or opinion. But it seems to me that Follow the Prophet potentially becomes both an educational and a recruiting tool and then a training tool. So that you start with somebody who never quite thought about it. You get them intrigued with the possibility that they too could go out and start something. And then you can give them the tools to do it with. And I think to the degree that they can sort of let you know what they need to know more about, that you will really create a community of entrepreneurs who will identify with your program and will also enrich your future episodes. In a way, you're creating a prosumer experience for learning entrepreneurship and learning about practical market economics. And I think it's a terrific concept. Where can people get to your podcast?
You can find it on the iHeartRadio app, and also you can find it on Spotify. Spotify is something a lot of us use for music. A lot of us through our credit cards and through other means have a free account, like myself. And it's not just for music, it's for podcasts as well. And you can find Follow the Prophet on any of those platforms. Basically, any type of platform you can imagine for podcasts, you will be able to find Follow the Prophet.
That's great. I really wish you well. And I'm very excited by this. And I think that you're launching something that could have a really big impact in helping grow an entire generation of new entrepreneurs who will go out, solve problems, create wealth, and make for a healthier and more prosperous America as we come out of the current pandemic. So I really do think what you're doing is very, very important.
Well, thank you, Newt. It is very timely. The economy is a wreck. And while we argue about a lot of things in the political world, really the one big thing we have to confront in the new year, going forward in future years, is really that our economy needs a lot of work. And it's going to take a lot of buy-in from a lot of people to get it back on the right track.
Well, and I think you're going to be one of the pioneers helping that happen. So I congratulate you.
Yeah, thank you, Newt. Always great to talk to you.
The Buck Sexton Podcast.
Freedom is our fight this year. You have a Democrat Party that increasingly just bares its authoritarian fangs without any sense whatsoever of fair play and good faith toward the other side, because they haven't had it for years, because defeating Trump in their minds justified absolutely anything.
The Buck Sexton Podcast. Get it for free daily on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts.
David Grasso's podcast, Follow the Prophet, is available at Gingrich360.com, on the iHeartMedia app, and wherever you get your podcasts. And now, here's a sneak peek of Follow the Prophet with David Grasso.
So whenever we're learning something new, you have doubts. Entrepreneurship, risk-taking, even learning anything new. You always think, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to get over the hump. Experts. We need to rely on experts. Where's the expert? I need to learn from experts. When in reality, sometimes there is no blueprint for life. Sometimes experts don't have any of the answers. And that's what today's episode is about. Sometimes we have the answers. Sometimes we can learn from experts, and sometimes we can't. I'm David Grasso, and this is Follow the Prophet. You know, a lot of people say it's rude to talk about money. But that's exactly what we do here on this show. We follow the prophet, of course, prophet with an F, to really think about the mindset that surrounds money. And there's no better way to talk about success than talking to successful people. My next guest is the most humble billionaire I've ever met. So I want to read something to you before I introduce my next guest. He actually comes out and says this on his website. He says, "Please don't ask me to connect on Facebook, WhatsApp, or Instagram. I'm not there. I've got better things to do. And quite frankly, so do you. Through the things I do and the people I meet, I aim to be a conduit of ideas, innovation, and even to entrepreneurship. I want to explore, I want to solve problems, and to inspire others to do the same. And that, my friends, is the most important thing you need to remember about me." So I'd like to introduce Jim McKelvey, co-founder of Square. How are you doing today, Jim?
Doing great, David. Happy to join you.
One thing about you, Jim, is that you're one of the most understated people I've met. And I was actually surprised to read this about you because when I met you, I had no idea who you were. You were standing in the green screen of the studio where I do episodes of Bold Business in New York City, and you were just this friendly Midwestern guy. I was surprised to hear that you were the co-founder of Square. You know, you came, you dress hip and young, and there's really zero airs about you. So why do you lead with this on your website?
Well, it's sort of an apology because I think everyone expects me to be all over social media. I mean, one of my friends started Twitter, and I have some things I like to say, but I've never been able to use social media safely. I tend to crack jokes that are misinterpreted. I feel like I'm too competitive and would get sucked in, and I've just never been drawn to it. So, I mean, I technically have Facebook accounts and LinkedIn accounts, but they're actually managed by PR teams. So I'm not actually there very much. I occasionally look at them, but I don't have any daily social media.
Well, Jim, but you have a fantastic personality. And I'm not just saying this. I meet thousands of people, and I actually remember you. And remember,
well, maybe that's because I don't use any social media, you know.
You know, and you had a way of breaking down your origin story that I really enjoyed, actually. So we all know what Square is, right? It's that little thing that you swipe the credit card on, right? But you actually explained to me, and we had a fun conversation about, you know, what existed before Square, and I called it the pre-Square. And you said, well, actually, I invented that too. So can you tell that story again? Because I really enjoyed it.
Well, I'm not quite sure which story you're referring to, but if it's the founding story of Square, it was a simple idea to enable me as an artist. So I'm a glassblower, and I sell things that people don't need. And the biggest problem with selling things that people don't need is if you lose a sale because you can't take a payment when they're ready to buy something, because they don't come back. And I lost a payment. I was in the process of starting a company with my friend Jack Dorsey, and we were casting around for ideas. Now, this was way before Jack was as famous as he is now, but Jack was working with me, and we were trying to find new ideas. And I got very lucky because I had a real problem. And the real problem was that I lost a sale, and the solution to that problem was what became Square.
Yeah, and was really interesting as part of that story, Jim, is you were telling me that once you guys actually made it, you know, you found a solution to a problem, you faced some pretty significant barriers. How did you get over those barriers?
So we had the most terrible thing happen that can happen to any startup, which is Amazon saw what we were doing, decided they wanted to own the whole market by themselves, and copied our product, undercut our price. And when Amazon does that to a startup, the startup always dies. So we were in the situation of looking for some way to fend off Amazon. And the reason I know no company has ever survived an onslaught from Amazon like that is I looked for them. And at least in 2014, when Amazon attacked Square, there were none. So we were terrified, but we still had to keep going. And ultimately, after about a year of competing with Amazon, they were the ones that gave up. And they actually did it in a pretty cool way. They mailed a little Square reader to all their former customers. And it always bothered me because I couldn't explain what had happened. I couldn't explain why we won. And so the search for that answer took me down a path for about 2 years until I found something that not only explained why Square beat Amazon, but was also this sort of blueprint for companies becoming dominant in new fields of business. And I call it the innovation stack.
Thank you to my guest, David Grasso. You can listen to his podcast, Follow the Prophet, by visiting our show page at newtsworld.com. Newt's World is produced by Gingrich 360 and iHeartMedia. Our executive producer is Debbie Myers. Our producer is Garnsey Sloan, and our researcher is Rachel Peterson. The artwork for the show was created by Steve Penley. Special thanks to the team at Gingrich 360. If you've been enjoying Newt's World, I hope you'll go to Apple Podcast and both rate us with 5 stars and give us a review so others can learn what it's all about. I'm Newt Gingrich. This is Newt's World.
The Buck Sexton Podcast.
Freedom is our fight this year. You have a Democrat Party that increasingly just bares its authoritarian fangs without any sense whatsoever of fair play and good faith toward the other side, because they haven't had it for years, because defeating Trump in their minds justified absolutely anything.
The Buck Sexton Podcast. Get it for free daily on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts.